Hello my dear students, in this session let us discuss about food contamination. How this food contamination happens, what are the consequences during the food contamination, what are the sources of food contamination, what are the factors affecting the food contamination, etc. It is one of the important topic in food microbiology. So let's begin with the video. What is food? Food is a fundamental substance which provides us energy, nutrients, etc. But there are scenarios where food gets contaminated. This contamination can lead to a lethal situation. This can be poisonous, which is called as food poisoning. There are different types of contamination. So let us discuss one by one. So what is food? Food is a fundamental, as I said, fundamental resource which provides energy and nutrients to the body. Whereas there are scenarios where this food gets contaminated. There are various types of contamination, but in this session let us discuss there are mainly three types of contamination of food. One is biological contamination, chemical contamination, and third one is physical contamination. But in this session we will be concentrating only on biological mode of contamination. So what is the biological mode of contamination? It is the contamination caused by microorganisms. This might be bacteria, viruses, spores, fungi, parasites, etc. These are some of the major contaminants of biological means. Whereas coming back to the chemical mode of contamination, here addition of hazardous elements such as pesticides, toxins, and other unfavorable materials which can cause food poisoning. Coming back to the physical mode of contamination, this is due to the food damage. This is due to the food damage. So here are three main types of food contamination. Three types of food contamination. So let us discuss one by one. As I said, we will be concentrating only on biological source of contamination. This can be bacteria, viruses, spores of bacteria or any other microorganisms, fungi, other parasites. So these are some of the means of biological contamination. Now let us see how this biological contamination is playing a role, from where this biological contamination is coming. The first thing is soil. In the soil, there are diverse class of microorganisms. It can be beneficial and it can be harmful. Along with this, contaminated water, air, dust, animal interaction, which is nothing but zoonotic mode of infection. Zoonotic mode of infection means if you have a pet at home and from there zoonotic infection is transferred to humans. So these are some of the major source of food contamination from where the pathogenic microorganism can enter into your food. So the complete process is in the form of chain. The contamination process is in the form of chain. What is this chain? The first is production, process, and in this production process you can see, for example, if you are growing fruits or vegetables, then if you are using contaminated water, then this contaminated water can add pathogenic microorganism to your fruits and vegetables. Hence, this process comes under production process. And moving on to the next process is processing of food. Here, my dear students, especially the non-vegetarian, if the slaughtering of meat is not properly handled, then there are higher chances of food getting contaminated, especially non-veg food or meat products. So like this, in food processing, I am giving you a scenario or an example of meat products. This can also be, there can be also a scenario of beverages, where if they have not done a proper pasteurization process, then it can lead to food contamination. So these are some of the scenarios. Next come, after production, processing, then comes distribution. Once you manufacture food, once you process food, then the next important step after the processing is distribution, where you are sending your food to retail and wholesale market. As we all know, retail and wholesale market are not equipped with hygienic equipments, where there are lots of different food products coming under one roof. There are higher chances of food getting cross-contamination. So distribution also plays a very important role. Then comes consumption. Just imagine you are highly influenced with non-vegetarian dishes. You like non-vegetarian dishes. You bring meat product, and if this meat product is not cooked properly at home, and if you consume that meat product which is contaminated with microorganisms or its toxin, you may end up with food poisoning. So these were some of the steps involved in food chain from production till the consumption. So let us see one by one what are the pathogens involved in food contamination. Till now we had discussed about the introduction part of foodborne pathogens or food contamination. So let us see with the PPT presentation. So we have already discussed the definition of foodborne pathogens. Common foodborne pathogens we will be discussing now. The impact on public health we will be discussing now. The economic consequences also we will be discussing. So what are foodborne pathogens? Foodborne pathogens are the microorganism which causes illness when you consume the food which is infected with microbial pathogens. Some of the common examples we have already said that bacteria, fungi, viruses, spores, etc. are the major source of food contamination via microorganisms. Among these microorganisms, bacteria and viruses are reported to be one of the major contaminants among the diverse class of microorganisms. In this slide, you can see some of the major recall caused by pathogens, microbial pathogens. For example, in 2010, Salmonella species caused illness for 3,000 people, which has been already reported. And in Turkey, again the Salmonella species was reported to cause illness among 35 million pounds. The loss was 35 million pounds due to Salmonella contamination, both in-house contamination and which resulted in the closure of that particular plant. Similarly, in 2016, frozen fruits and vegetables were contaminated. Nearly 358 consumer products were contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes, and which resulted in closure of that particular food manufacturing unit. Similarly, 2018 also the beef meat was contaminated with Salmonella species, and 2019 E. coli, the salad was contaminated with E. coli, and similar was the case in 2020 where Thomas International onions were contaminated with Salmonella species, and ready to eat food, especially the meat products, chicken, was contaminated with Listeria. And about infant powdered formula food which is used for the infant was also contaminated with Chronobacteria species. In this you can see the major contaminant. As I discussed, bacteria and viruses are the major contaminants of food, and among bacteria, Salmonella species is reported to be the highest, having the highest contamination pattern compared to the other bacteria, followed by Listeria, E. coli, which is capable of producing Shiga toxin, and the other pathogens. Along with this, there are other various allergens which also has an impact on food illness. As we discussed, Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, Campylobacter, noroviruses, Clostridium, Staphylococcus aureus, and Vibrio species are reported to be one of the common foodborne pathogens. The symptoms might vary based on the individual. For example, abdominal pain, diarrhea, nausea and vomiting, chills and sweating. Sometimes it may cause fever, and also it causes headaches. We have already discussed the source of contamination, contamination of water. We have already discussed the contamination of water, undercooked food, zoonotic infections. We have discussed about the zoonotic infection and food processing here, handling of food in the environment, emergency concern when the foodborne infection is from viruses. Symptoms: gastrointestinal symptoms. In certain cases, neurological symptoms are also reported from the individuals which are infected with foodborne pathogens. These symptoms can be long-term and short-term. Along with this, my dear students, I would like to add a comment here that the individual with immunocompromised are having higher chances or are at higher risk for foodborne infections. Here you can see children, elderly population, and immunocompromised patients, which are reported to cause, which are the highest target for foodborne infections. Next comes the infection. Infection is a scenario or is a condition where a pathogen or pathogenic microorganism invades into the body after the consumption of contaminated food. Example: E. coli, Salmonella species, Listeria monocytogenes, all viruses and parasites. These are reported to cause infection, whereas intoxication, this is a scenario where a pathogen grows inside the food product and secretes toxins that causes illness when that particular food is consumed. Example: Staphylococcus aureus, Clostridium, Bacillus cereus species, etc. Like this, you have different types of microorganisms which are responsible for food spoilage. Next becomes the important characteristics here is the detection of foodborne pathogen. Early detection is always advantageous in order to diagnose it, in order to start the medication, etc. So detection can be traditional, based on traditional methods, wherein they involve gram staining plus plating techniques, culturing in enrichment media, etc. Along with this, you also have immunoassays such as ELISA, agglutination test with monoclonal and polyclonal antibodies. Recently, they have developed markers which easily identify a particular pathogen which is responsible. So biomarkers, PCR based, which are nothing but molecular based techniques. Different types of PCR service. And recent implementation of nanotechnology can result in development of nanosensors, wherein a nanoparticle is tagged with antibody or antigen, and when they encounter with a particular pathogen, they go and bind and gives the signal which can be used for quantitative detection whether the pathogen is present or not. The nanosensors can be of different types like electrochemical, optical, mechanical, etc. So let's move on to the next slide, where control measures for foodborne pathogens. We have discussed now the detection pattern or detection methods used for foodborne pathogens. Now we will be discussing about the control measures. Here you can see GMP, good manufacturing practice, plays a very important role, and HACCP, which analyze the hazardous and critical components present in the food and identifies and gives what to be done on an emergency basis. Food safety management system should be implemented where food processing units are present. In the next slide, There are other patterns or there are other methods in art which can control the foodborne infection. For example, the use of temperature. Sorry, use of temperature. As we have discussed, as we all know, based on the temperature, the bacteria can be grouped as saprophytes, mesophytes, thermophiles, etc. If you increase the temperature, then you have less chances of saprophytes, saprophilic pathogens growing in a food product. And if you increase the temperature, then there are less chances of mesophile growing at higher temperature. Or if you decrease the temperature, there are less chances of mesophile and thermophiles growing at lower temperature. So like this, based on temperature control, we can, by altering the temperature, we can control the growth of pathogenic microbes. Also, water analysis and the ingredients what you are using for the production of food. We need to always monitor the safety of the water used for the food production, and hygienic practice at the food processing units are highly desirable, where the individuals who are working, the utensils or the fermenters or the instruments what they are using should be hygienic. There should be hygiene practice for food handlers. Like this, there are various control measures. Along with this, along with this the use of food additives. For example, I will give you an example: garlic extract or ginger extract. These are some of the natural additives which we can use. For example, tulsi extract. These are some of the natural additives, and in recent times we are also using essential oils. These are having antimicrobial properties. When you use such additives which are having high consumer acceptance rate, plays a very important role to control the growth of pathogenic microorganisms, and providing training periodically to the staff plays an important role in order to maintain the hygienic condition. Just imagine, even after maintaining everything, there might be cross contamination, or there might be a scenario where the contamination happens and the food product is already into the market. During such scenario, you need to have a facility which can trace like which batch is contaminated, with providing the serial number, manufacturing date, etc. By these methods, we can easily track the origin of the product, where it is contaminated, and what kind of rapid measures you can use to avoid the contamination. Surveillance and frequent monitoring is highly recommended. Highly recommended in food industries in order to prevent the contamination. With this, let me conclude this session. I hope you have enriched with the knowledge of food contamination and its resources. Let us see in our next class. We will be discussing more on food microbiology related topics. Thank you. Till then, have a nice time ahead.